question. Have you ever felt your joy, your zest for life just dissolve as soon as you start comparing yourself to someone else or some other ideal? Grass is always greener over there, right? Where you are at now is never good enough. And so you're not good enough, right? That's what we subcommunicate to ourselves as soon as we start entering this spiral of comparison. This video is really close to home, so if you've clicked on this, likely you also experience the intensity and the pain of comparison. And this deep part of you knows that it's not useful and it's not helpful, but how do we stop this thing? So this video isn't exactly going to be a feel-good, stay in your lane, you got it, baby, kind of thing. Because you got it, baby. But in this video, we're going to explore a little bit more about why comparison is the thief of joy. Why do we compare ourselves to other people again and again and again and again, even though we know that it doesn't make us feel good, that it actually spirals us down instead of generating something productive and positive? In other videos, you would have heard me speak about the difference between being negatively motivated and positively motivated. And a lot of the time, the consequence of succumbing to the spiral of comparison leads us to being negatively motivated to do a thing. And negatively motivated to do a thing is you're wanting to move away from pain. You're wanting to move away from something. You want to avoid something. And so the comparison might get you motivated to do a thing, but why you're motivated is from a place that is actually subcommunicating some kind of self-hatred. There goes the phone again. The ring! Thank you for agreeing with me. So we don't want you to be negatively motivated, because whilst it does motivate you for a time, it's rocky foundations. It's not sustainable for the long term. So many things that we're going to touch on, but particularly we're going to touch on some of the cultural, familial, ancestral origins of comparison, how comparison impacts our joy, our self-worth, and alignment to our soul's destiny, our path, our medicine, whatever word you want to use. And I want to speak to as well the darker truths of why we actually cling to comparison despite its destructive effects. Why do we keep doing the thing? Why are we addicted to this? What is the secondary gain from feeding comparison? Which doesn't get spoken to a lot. So what I like to do on this channel apparently is speak to some of the shadow things that don't get spoken to, because that makes it whole and complete. I'm going to weave throughout this video some practical guided exercises that'll be relatively short. So if you're driving a car, come back to them, okay? If that is exercise in which I'm encouraging you to close your eyes, for example. And I'll probably wrap up with a sort of Heartwork, what I like to call Heartwork, which is a guided practice that you can take home with you, so to speak. So let's hop into it, shall we? Yes! Okay, so what are the origins of the comparison wounding that we experience in our society, our culture? We could say that comparison has some kind of evolutionary purpose. Comparing ourselves to others might have been a survival mechanism, like survival of the fittest kind of thing. And observing the strengths of another could have assisted us in strategizing better for hunting, for gathering, for protecting tribe. But in modern society, the instinct has sort of become distorted and weaponized. And who are they being weaponized by? By institutions who feed off your wounding, who feed off your weaknesses. For example, hello education system, telling us that our worth is quantifiable and hierarchical. What does that mean? That means your worth was numbered. You are a percentage, you are a letter A, B, C, D, or E. You are a ranking in a bell curve, and that's your worth. As if we could reduce the personal universe, the multi-dimensional being that you are, to a piece of paper. A child who struggles academically may actually believe that they are inherently worthless compared to other people, setting up a lifetime for comparative thinking, where in actuality, that little being might not have resonated with the education system. You know, not everyone's good at short-term fucking rote learning and then boom, exam. You know, some people might actually be able to explicate something to you in a dialogue to prove some sort of understanding. It's holistic, right? And the education system, generally speaking, is not holistic. We've also got the cultural institutions feeding off our wounding of being enough, of being beautiful, of being perfect. Like, media perpetuates this story of, you know, to be good enough, you've got to be successful, you've got to be beautiful, you've got to be happy. And even spiritual institutions feed off your wounding of wanting happiness. So they pull out all of your money, they drain you of your resources because you don't feel happy, which is still your fault, and you've got to pay me more money for you to be happy. But then you aren't happy, right? And so media and social media thrive on the constant showcase of some sort of ideal, of some sort of perfection, creating a culture where people measure their worth against others' highlights, right? And on a conceptual level, like, we get that social media is just exhibiting like one picture perfect frame of one picture perfect moment, which isn't a whole and valid representation of that person's life. It doesn't show their shadows unless their Instagram profile is all about behind the scenes shadow content or something, you know. But as soon as you reduce the 3D, 4D into a 2D picture frame, you've got only part of the picture. And that's hard for us to grasp because whenever comparison comes in, like, it can only enter if there are already pre-existing entry points open that are in resonance with the wounding of comparison, right? Another way to put that is we're not afflicted by comparison wounding if at the core of our being we know that we are enough. And so the wounding is just hooking in on a wound that is unresolved. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, another example of this sort of cultural institutions feeding off this entire like weakness, wounding points of being enough or good enough is the whole like ideal body. Not only does the beauty industry promote unattainable standards, but it also ties those standards to worthiness and happiness. So you might believe that just because your body structure looks a little different, you might feel shame. You might feel disconnected from your body. The media might portray that by 20 years old, you're supposed to be a millionaire because here are all the other 20-year-old millionaires. Excuse me? And even though, again, like, you know that that's ridiculous, but on some level, it still stings you, right? Why? Because that wound is already there. Because some part of you really believes that you are not enough. And compassion to that. Massive, massive kindness to that. What I'm speaking to is a real, tender, and intimate core wound. And why that core wound arose is always, from one level, always coming back to our family of origin and our first even 7 years of life. Not to blame our parents, they did their best, they could only give us what they had, and so on. We acknowledge that, we don't exile them. And we got to accept reality as it is. Some stuff went down which led us to believe that us as our authentic, whole, incomplete, imperfect, beings aren't enough. And we've got to be fitting into some sort of mold in order to receive the love and acceptance that we are seeking and needing, right? So, yeah, furthering on from that, just speaking to what I mentioned before about the sort of, you got to have it all figured out by 20. There's that, and there's also the whole like one way to succeed narrative, which is ripe within the realm of comparison. A lot of industries, especially like entrepreneurship industries, like to perpetuate the myth that there's only like one path to success. That path being marked by wealth, by fame, by power of some description. So their whole like self-made millionaires, these stories often omit the immense privileges and systemic advantages that a lot of those folks had. And so it can leave people like chasing some sort of impossible standard or dream and feeling inadequate for not achieving it themselves. What I'm not saying by acknowledging this is undermining the super crazy, amazing hard work, dedication, and devotion that a lot of folks do invest, even amidst seeming unfortunate circumstances. And then they are the self-made millionaires, so to speak. So, not undermining them. But there are sides of the story that are omitted, right? And those parts of the story that are omitted are the parts that allow us to feed into some false illusion that they can do it, but we can't, because we don't get to see the whole story. So I want to move on to now a little bit more about the origins of comparison in terms of ancestry, right? Family and ancestry. So I want to invite you just to take a second to ask yourself, in your family of origin, like at home, your mom, your dad, if you had siblings, at home, were you allowed to be you? And allowed is maybe a weird word, because you're like, well, yeah, I'm me. But on some level, were you held in the fullness of who you are, with your interests being maybe different than your family's, and were they held and supported? Or was there some sort of subtle or not so subtle push for you to go a specific trajectory, right? You in comparison to this ideal is what it becomes. Yes? No? Maybe? I don't know. All good. Either way, we like to notice. Here on this channel, we notice things. So, parents often unknowingly perpetuate cycles of comparison by projecting their unmet dreams onto their children. And so parents end up living vicariously through their children sometimes. And if a child's natural inclinations don't align with those projections, the result is often one of shame, a sense of failure, a sense of who I am is not enough. And it's so much more nuanced than that. I'm just zooming into one particular manifestation of the parental implications upon us within the realm of comparison, yeah? So for example, there could be a mother who dreamed of being an artist but chose a stable corporate job. And by consequence, because of the undercurrent fears of survival, of even the conditioning from their family and the sort of unspoken rules of those generations, that mother might encourage her child to follow the same path, dismissing their interest in pursuing a creative career. You can't be an artist. It's too unstable. You'll be starving. You'll whatever the story is. And it's coming from some place of love, yeah, but it's love deeply enmeshed with fear. So then as children, we aren't wired at the beginning to question authority. We soak it in as gospel. We internalize these messages that who we are is impractical, we're selfish, and we're setting up some long life battle between our desires or perceived obligations. And that becomes a structural component of who you are. So again, what I'm speaking to is core, okay? And I'm not expecting, if I can use this word, that this video is just going to like, boom, deshackle you and you're totally healed. Like that would be unkind of me to project that or place that sort of, what am I trying to say? Like present that this is what this video is going to do. Like, hey, it's a big process. I hope that this video will allow you to come into relationship with the parts of yourself that don't feel like they're enough. But the work is the work. Yeah, it takes however long it takes. It's non-linear. And just while I've mentioned the linearity and non-linearity of things, in a society that is governed by linear time, where the past is back there, the future's over there, and you're supposed to go that way. And as soon as it's a straight line, we've got grids, we've got metrics, we've got this better than this compared to this, instead of a circular time in which you are the center of time and everything is revolving around you. And so you carry your past, your present, your future within you, and who you are now informs the next now, which is infinite. So just a note on that, maybe a video about that sometime. And zooming out a little bit within ancestry, we've got intergenerational themes. There is something to say about the realm or the conditions that our ancestors were living in. And I don't come to this assuming I got it figured out. You know, I don't come to this assuming I know what my ancestors truly went through, and the conditionings and the expectations of society and the norms and the cultural obligations, so to speak, that were just ripe and more of a thing that you just had to do in order to belong. But over time, these themes emerge because you can just trace the pattern. There is something to say of, like, if, you know, even with gender roles, like for so long there was a specific role that men would play in the family, a specific role that women would play in the family, and that was kind of just that. And so it's subcommunicated that if you wanted to do something different, wrong, so you're wrong. And that unresolved meme becomes a meme for the lineage, right? And we get to play it out unconsciously until it becomes conscious, and we're like, oh, this is bigger than me. This didn't start with me. And that's also what I like to drill into these videos, is the understanding that it did not start with you. Okay? It's not your fault. It is not your fault, okay? However, it's your responsibility. With awareness comes responsibility. And I know for myself, I get really stubborn. I'm like, I don't want this responsibility. Let me just check out and go travel the world for the rest of my life. Thanks. But it doesn't work like that, because wherever you go, there you are. You carry these themes, these wounds with you, and so they're going to be activated wherever you go. It might just look different. So we do kind of have to resolve this if we want to live a good life. Yeah. And my ego still kicks and screams about it, so no judgment if you're like, no. Okay. But at some point, we get sick of our shit. At least for myself, I know I get really tired of my own crap. And sometimes it just gets worse and worse and worse until I sort of don't have a choice. I really need to face this. So may this also be a preventative measure for you to not wait until it gets the worst ever for you to be able to face this. Yeah. Final note on the family side of things. Maybe in your family there was an implicit comparison between siblings. For example, you know, this whole thing of, well, your brother, he's a straight A student, and why can't you be more like him? Or, oh, your older sister, she's just so easy. Why can't you be more like her? And it's a subtle narrative that gets passed down, and maybe that happened to your parents and so on. And this doesn't leave a lot of room for individuality or paths that are different than the other paths, right? Simple, but necessary to be aware of, especially if we've been unquestioning of the sort of effects that our family have had upon us. Because we love our family, okay? I'm not saying you should just go hate and judge on your family. No, like, just be aware of the dynamics, yeah? Be aware of what shaped you into who you are today. And seek help, yeah? Therapy is fantastic for this sort of stuff. So, a guiding exercise. I invite you to reflect upon a specific moment when you felt compared to a sibling, a peer, a parent, right? Just a moment when you felt compared to someone else. Okay? So just take a moment. If you're not driving, I invite you to, if it feels available for you, to softly close your eyes or just lower your gaze a little bit and soften your gaze. Okay, to start to tap into the more of the unconscious. So again, ask yourself, was there a specific time when I felt compared to someone else? First moment, first image, first memory that comes to you, just go with that. It doesn't have to be the most comparing moment, right? Just the first one's okay. And I want you to now tune into that and ask yourself, how did this experience shape my perception of myself? In other words, what did this moment make me believe about myself? Yeah. And now ask yourself, do I still carry the weight of those expectations or this belief? Do I still carry the weight of those expectations or this belief? And take a deep breath. Sigh out. And if your eyes were closed, lightly open them. You can wriggle your toes and fingers if that feels good to bring you back into the space. That was maybe about a minute. And in this short period of time, it's quite amazing what we can discover about ourselves or remember, right? So, nothing to do with that, just noticing. Moving on. I want to speak to you now about how comparison steals joy. Why and how does this dang thing of comparison steal our joy? So, comparison, for starters, is a form of disconnection. When we compare ourselves to others, we mentally, psychologically, emotionally step out of our present experience and project ourselves into an imagined reality. Makes sense, right? And this process disconnects us from the here and now, the richness of this moment, the multiplicity and multifaceted nuance of this life that we're living now. And why comparison disconnects us is it often takes us out of a present now abundant mindset into a dissociated, disconnected, future projecting, past projecting lack mentality. For example, you are scrolling on through social media and you see a friend's luxurious vacation or they've achieved a massive success in their business. And if you don't catch the default state of being wounded, the default belief of I'm not enough, likely that little wormy worm will find its way through the cracks, and you might start losing awareness of your own blessings and joys of your reality, of your life, of your work, of whatever it might be. And you might become consumed by what you believe you're missing, what they have but what you don't have. And this disconnection robs you of the ability to appreciate the present moment because you're not in the present moment anymore. You've checked out. You're in some imagined reality. You're in an illusion reality. And this makes it hard to ground in and focus in on what your thing is to do right now. As if you can compare an apple to an orange. Sure, they have different colors, they taste different, they have different textures, but how could you possibly say one is better than another? You can't. You can try, but relative to what? The apple is better than the orange relative to what metric? That's so subjective. There's no objective metric that makes an apple better than an orange. And we do that with ourselves and the other people constantly. As if I'm an apple and I'm comparing myself to you, who's a strawberry, as if I can do that with any sort of grounded arguments, You might find yourself comparing yourself to people you see on YouTube or even to me on some unconscious level. But you're completely different than me. You grew up in a very different place, maybe. If you grew up in Australia, hey, what's up? You didn't have my parents. Maybe you are Lebanese, but maybe you're not. I'm full-blood Lebanese. That's already really different. Very different ancestries, right? And so on a zoomed out level, it's impossible to compare ourselves to other people, truly. Because when we compare, it's like we're feeding this belief that it's possible to name something that is like better. And again, I remind you, this was highly conditioned by the education system, which tried to quantify you and tried to put you on a bell curve. That tried to make you believe that the student who gets an A is better than the student who gets a C. That's tough. That's tough to unravel, but it's very, very possible, okay? There's also an existential cost to comparison. And what does that mean? Well, comparison has a deeper existential impact because it reinforces this illusion that our worth is external and tied to achievements, appearances, things that we can own and possess, right? And on an existential level, this undermines the intrinsic, whole, real, now value of beingness. Comparison tries to tell you that you're a human doing, when in actuality you're a human being, and beingness precedes doings. And then if you then try to compare your human beingness with another's beingness, that is a further form of you trying to make something which is intrinsic, extrinsic, tangible, linear, as if you can compare yourself to it. So an example of that is, let's say you are young, you are emerging into a particular career of some description, and you start comparing yourself to the trajectory of a peer, believing then that you're falling behind because they are a similar age to you, they started working on their business at a similar time to you, but why are they more successful? And then you have to ask yourself, define success. And then you have to ask yourself again, why do I believe that I understand the full story of this person? So if you believe that you're falling behind, this steals your joy, right? Because then suddenly everything you're working on has lost value. And it also distracts you from deepening your work, from honing your craft, from focusing on the things that you need to do, from exploring your unique talents and walking the path of your purpose. There is not one way to do a thing. There is not one timeline to achieve a thing by. Just because you're 25, it does not mean you're supposed to have everything figured out. Even if you're 50 and you've done a career thing for a while, doesn't mean it's the end, doesn't mean you can't change. It's non-linear. There's no script for this, but we've been fed some kind of script. Like, you go to school, you go to uni, you finish the uni, you get a job, you get a partner, you marry, kids, mortgage, house, the things, goodbye. And then you're supposed to retire, and then you're supposed to do the things that you wanted to do your entire life but didn't. It feels like an archaic story, right? But in our psyche, this is hardwired, because that's the intergenerational programming. The parts of us that are more connected to our soul, our soul's essence, which is transcending all of that, it's like, what are you talking about? But the parts of us that are more grounded into this blood and this bone and our ancestry and the culture, it's like, yo, I'm doing something wrong if I'm not doing that. So there's also an inner turmoil here, which is the existential part as well. The inner turmoil between soul, ego, the conditioned self, the unconditioned self, the real self, the false self, right? Big. Big. There are also some kind of hidden energies that feed into comparison, and I've touched on them like a little bit before, but I want to just name that there are also toxic ancestral loyalties. Toxic anything loyalties. Remaining trapped in comparison can often serve an unconscious loyalty to our family system, or our culture, our cultural system, or our societal system. By striving to meet inherited expectations, we can unconsciously avoid the fear of forging our own path. We have a loyalty to the system because we want to belong. And just because we have a loyalty to a thing doesn't mean it is serving our highest and best good. We might not pursue a particular path because we don't want to because we don't want to disappoint our parents, even if it comes at the cost of our joy, of our bliss, of our path, of purpose. And I'm naming this because that might not be at the forefront of your mind, but it's worth at least asking yourself, is part of that true for me? Like, on some level, am I really afraid that I'm going to be rejected, abandoned, judged by my family if I individuate and choose a different path? Or at least walk a path that may be just a little bit different even, not so radical maybe. That's real. That's valid, right? We have a core need to belong. And naming some core principles of family constellations, because it's so practical, really. In family constellations, I've named this before in another video, but we become loyal to the excluded one. Even if that excluded one is like 5 generations back, like, we will be loyal to them because the entire system wants to be whole. And what family constellations is really about is allowing everything in the system to belong, so that you're not being loyal to the excluded ancestor who walked their own path, but then they got like exiled by the family, right? It's like, hey, exiled one, you belong, and I'm me. I'm gonna do life a little different, and I carry all of my ancestors in my heart because I belong to this lineage too. So yeah, toxic ancestral loyalties, toxic societal loyalties, just toxic loyalties, full stop. This is also a hidden reason why we compare ourselves to others. Okay. This one is also really big. There is a big secondary gain of staying in the comparing energy. And that secondary gain is often connected to the victim. What does that mean? So comparison steals our joy obviously, okay? So why do we keep doing it? This is where it gets really interesting. We might have a secondary gain of staying in that state of comparison because it feeds the inner victim. And why is it a secondary gain? Because we gain something by staying in the victim. For example, I'll never be as successful as them because they just had way more opportunities than me. And this belief is one, a comparison, and two, feeding the victim, because it allows you to remain stagnant and avoiding the discomfort of the unknown, of effort, of responsibility, of change. So we compare ourselves to others to justify inaction. We can frame other people as more fortunate, more lucky, more connected, they just know more people, they were just in the right place at the right time, they're more charismatic than me, all the things to avoid taking responsibility for our own growth. Hi, I've done this a lot, okay? So this, again, I will keep saying it. Not shaming, not blaming. I'm not trying to make you feel less than if you also do this. I've also done this a lot. Imperfect human. Hi, nice to meet you. Do you do this? Can you place that within your own system? Can you feel that this is also a reason why you keep comparing yourself to others? Like why you're kind of magnetized to that as a response? When in actuality, there's just a victim archetype working with you that is sort of like a self-protective mechanism to avoid some sort of pain of responsibility, of facing the unknown, of discipline, of whatever it might be. Because it's somehow easier to rest in that comparing state to enable further inaction. So real. So real. Oh my goodness. We don't often speak about that. But that's a really, really big one. And it could be another thing that you are, as in what I'm trying to say is it might not be the victim that's enabling the comparison. It could be something else. Like you could be getting a secondary gain from another sort of pattern. You could be comparing yourself to other people because it enables some other thing, right, that you're not willing to face or address, right? Compassion. This is like the nitty-gritty stuff, yeah? So, again, a really quick self-reflection activity. You may softly close your eyes again if that feels accessible to you. And take a deep breath. And I invite you now to ask yourself, what is one area in my life where I frequently compare myself to others? I'll say that again. What is one area in my life where I frequently compare myself to others? Just sit with that for a moment. So maybe an area of your life surfaced. Maybe it's health, maybe it's work, maybe it's money, whatever it might be. And now I would like you and invite you to ask yourself, what is the underlying fear or belief feeding this comparison? What is the underlying fear or belief that is feeding this comparison? So just sit with that. Kindness to yourself. Maybe the area that you're comparing yourselves to others is work, career, success. And the underlying fear or belief driving this comparison could be that I'm only successful if I'm earning a lot of money. So that comparison gets fed when there's someone you know who's just earning more money than you. So it feeds the belief that you're not successful because you're not earning X, right? Another question, last one of this little exercise. How might letting go of this comparison open new possibilities for growth? I'll say that again. How might letting go of that comparison open up new possibilities for growth? And sit with that for a moment. Good. So just using the example I used before, letting go of the comparison of money could open up new possibilities for growth by allowing myself to expand my definition of success. Whew. Liberation, right? Okay. Good job. Good job for noticing. It's not always easy to notice. Oh my God, it's not always easy to notice. But you did it. Okay. I want to touch on now also something that is less spoken to. And that is the dark side of joy. You're like, what? I'm like, yes. There is something to say about some sort of shadow of fixating on joy, actually. Why? Because if, for example, the society, the culture is obsessed with happiness and promotes that happiness, joy is the ultimate goal, then it actually can feed into more reasons why we don't feel enough. Because we're not joyous all the time. We're not happy all the time, as if we're supposed to be. And by definition, in the truest sense, happiness allows us to be happy in our sadness, happy in our anger. But in the way that culture often describes happiness, we're now fed the story that if we're not happy, we failed. Ooh, there are layers. We're just peeling back layers of the onion over here. And so if we're then now fed this belief that we failed if we're not happy, oh my goodness me. There goes the comparison spiral again. Because that person's more happy and that person's more happy and they're living a more joyous life and I'm not. Hello, toxic positivity. There's a shadow which encourages people to suppress the hard stuff, the struggles, the discomfort, which can lead to a superficial happiness, which is often what we see on social media. So we're actually comparing to falsity. That's the unrealistic standard, yeah? Even the happiest people ever, they're still incarnate, so they have a shadow, so they have dark sides, so they don't have good days. Maybe what you're seeing is like the summer of their life instead of the winter. So just be aware of that, okay? There is something to say about joy also feeding into the comparison. True fulfillment comes not from chasing joy, but from being present and disciplined in the face of life, for taking responsibility. And I'm speaking to this not from any place of like, I've mastered this thing, okay? I do not want you ever to pedestal me or anyone. I'm speaking to this because this is a real process and I have my good cycles and I have my cycles where this is a little harder. I know in my life when I've been more disciplined, things have felt like, things are ticking over, and I might not be in the most stoked about everything, but there is a sense of there's movement, and I'm putting energy in my bank account of resilience, of fulfillment, and it's a compound effect. And in those phases of my life, I get that joy, fulfillment is an emergent phenomena. It's not something out there that I'm supposed to grab. It's not attained in a physical possession or amount of money or likes or comments or whatever it might be. It's not something outside of myself. And the fulfillment comes when I really just hold that as truth. I allow that to flood my being. And I allow myself then to come back home to my heart and my center and my core so that I don't spread myself too thin. And that's huge, right? That is a big part of the fulfillment. You are filling your own cup, right? For example, let's say you're a musician and you commit to daily practice, which breeds deeper satisfaction in your growth because you recognize that that's what allows you to move away from the super structured scales and theory into improvisation, which is allowing your soul's medicine to work through the vehicle of this instrument. And that's not a fleeting thing. Like, there's work that you had to do to get there. And then there's a state that you access, which is so much more fulfilling than plucking the strings and going through the arduous work, right? That's not fleeting. That's long term. And to avoid chasing joy in a superficial way, of spreading ourselves thin, of thinking that the joy is out there but not here, is being okay with discomfort as best as we can. You know, the antidote to comparison is not joy, it's grounded presence. This is huge. I'm going to say that again. The antidote to comparison is not joy, it's grounded presence. By embracing discomfort, by embracing uncertainty, by embracing the fact that we have limits, we are a finite expression of the infinite. We create space for authentic growth because it's non-linear, it's unique to us. Okay, we might have strengths that others don't, and others might have strengths that we don't, and that's cool. We can't be everything to everyone, and we're not supposed to be. We can't have all the skills ever in the world because we're not supposed to. That's why you're you, and that's why I'm me. Real growth comes from taking the small, even uncomfortable steps towards improvement, towards growth, because your purpose is a path, not a destination. If you haven't seen my video called Your Purpose is a Path, Not a Destination, go check that out. So how is that all landing for you? We touched on some really deep and maybe even uncomfortable points, and I hope that these points that have maybe been lightly poked or, stroked are, hope allowing you to learn more about yourself, allowing you to see where you don't need to spread yourself thin anymore, where you are externalizing happiness as something over there, as some achievement over there, as grass is always greener, instead of recognizing that it comes from you. It comes from your human beingness, not your human doingness. Okay. So, wrapping up this video, I have a little Heartwork for you to take home with you. And this is really beautiful. So if you do have the space of at least 20 minutes, I invite you to do this. The invitation is for you to write a letter to your younger self. And by write, I mean write with a physical pen and paper, not typing. There's something very different that happens when you do write with a pen. So in this letter, I invite you to address a moment when you first, in your memory, felt inadequate due to some sort of comparison. And in this letter, unpack that, okay? Share your now reflections with your younger self about how you don't need to do that, and how you're your own unique being, and a compassion. I get why you felt that, and offer understanding, right? Offer support. to your younger self. Offer that guiding light that, hey, I wasn't there for you then, but I'm here for you now, and you'll always have a safe place with me, yeah? So give yourself 20 to 30 minutes to do that, and allow that to be an imperfect, beautiful process for you to connect deeply with you, okay, your heart, bringing kindness and compassion to this space, which is actually what's going to generate fulfillment for you. And if you want to supplement that, you can augment this Heartwork by engaging, at least for the next week, at the end of the day, listing 3 unique qualities or 3 unique achievements that defined your day, no matter how small. Some small wins, right? What was something that you're really grateful for? What was something that you achieved today and you're like, hey, I'm just going to acknowledge that to myself. Not shining it, not like needing to prove it or show it to the world, but putting energy in my bank account, right? Because I can. So I hope you dive deep with these exercises and extract the goodness out of this video, and find kindness to yourself. Because a final reminder, your joy is not found in someone else's story. Your joy, your true joy, fulfillment, is found in the courage to live your own life, to live your own story. There is your permission slip. You don't actually need one. Okay. Cool. So I will leave this video here. Thank you so much for making it through this video. I commend you. It's not always easy to find the time in our busy days to gift ourselves time, right? To do some work, to self-reflect, to learn. So go you. If you really liked this video, you can support this channel and help the algorithm love me by liking this video. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Share this video with people who you feel would benefit from hearing this. And breathe. You got this. All right. Sending you love through the interwebs, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.